We'll right into our Board of Directors meeting for Monday, July the 25th. We'll call that to order, and we're going to ask Commissioner Holbluer to do an invocation, please.
Sure. Will you pray with me, please? Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you this afternoon on this absolutely glorious day. We thank you for all the blessings you have given us. Ask that the decisions that are made today may be done right in thy sight. Help us in all that we do and all that we say. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Please note our mission and vision statements. And moving to number 4, public comment. This first opportunity for public comment. Please give your name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anybody online that you know of, Patricia? Any hands up or no? Okay. Well, we'll close the public comment opportunity. There'll be another opportunity at the end of our board meeting. And we'll move right into our consent items. Suggested motions are to approve the consent for the following items. That be the agenda for July the 25th, as well as the minutes from June the 27th. And I think you had an item that you wanted to call attention to our agenda.
The motion and support, and then we just.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just revving you up.
Okay, I'm ready this time, Matt.
I was revving you up. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion.
Okay, on the annual meeting adjournment section, it says move by and move by. I just thought it should say support. Simple change.
Move by and support the change. Okay. Is there any other?
One little spelling error, not bad, but first name is spelled wrong. Patricia.
Who's?
Mine.
Okay. Duly noted. Duly noted.
This is not important.
Oh, yes, it is.
Just don't call me late for supper.
Any other corrections, be it small or be it large? Okay. Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval of the consent items and minutes with the adjustments made indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. And then Amy is going to talk to us about our operating budget, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I've been in this role as a financial manager for CMH for about a month now. So I wanted to kind of follow in the steps of my predecessor and put together a little presentation for the proposed budget. This July timeline was the same as what Keith did, so kind of went from there. It was a great opportunity for me to dig in, kind of get some of the assumptions that are made in the process, kind of get a sense of the timeline. And I've invited Nick Saul, our budget audit analyst, to kind of go over the numbers later on. Today, we're going to cover the budget calendar. We'll talk some about the assumptions that we made when presenting the fiscal year 23 budget. And then we'll actually present the proposed budget. Right. So in general, the timeline has been for the next year budget starts in February. There's usually a presentation for the CMH board. I was not here at that time, but at that point, this group approved the maximum mills allowable, forwarded to the county board for authorization of that of our budget. And countywide, the fiscal year budget cycle starts the planning and opens that process in April. So this April, all of the conversations around assets and staffing and payroll and all the operational expenditures started in April, kind of led to today where we have the proposed budget that we're presenting in July. So next steps, next slide. In August, there will be a public hearing for countywide budget. I think that date looks like August 16th. And, those dates are crossed over here. We have the finance committee. It's at Nick's fault. Actually, in August, there's a finance committee meeting first, and they kind of do the once over on the countywide proposed budget. And then there's a public hearing on the first Board of Commissioners meeting in September, assuming, they will make adjustments as needed from those two events. And the final board approval is at the end of the month. Looks like September 27th for approval of the next year's budget. And then right away, October 1, the new fiscal year starts, and this budget that we're proposing will be presented and rolled out. Fine. So part of the process of putting together the numbers involves some assumptions. So highlighting some of the revenue assumptions, Milliman, which is the state's actuary and consulting agency that kind of looks at all the numbers. They take a look at enrollments and population size and the need, and kind of bring back to all of the CMHs their projections for different for rates that we would charge for different services as well as enrollments. And they projected this year a 2.9% reduction in rates and 6.3% increase in the enrollment. Some other revenue assumptions that were made ongoing. The millage stabilization funding grants will continue. I know Lynn really supports that, and it is a very good, as I've learned, it's a very good way to make sure that our partners have the resources that they need to provide services to our consumers and are well funded to be successful in their operation. One of the other assumptions that we have both as a revenue assumption and as an expense is the public health emergency project they're calling the unwind. So when the federal government gets to the point where they put an end date on that public health emergency, there'll be a whole process after that of getting all the people that have been assigned or been utilizing Medicaid, and they'll have to be reevaluated. There'll be a renewal period. They're projecting, I think, a 14-month unwind period after that public health emergency expires. So some of, it's a very conservative assumptions for revenue and expenditures because of that, some of those unknown factors. Next slide. And some of the expense assumptions that were made, we are anticipating, and Nick will talk more about this when he actually presents the fund summaries, a 4% increase in the millage health fund, the mental health fund, which we also have, we're projecting or proposing a 1% decrease in millage and grants, as well as a 2% for substance use revenues. That's kind of based again back on the numbers that we got from Milliman to offset some of those projections that were made on the revenue side. Again, the public health emergency, we want to have a balance between what the revenue assumptions are and keeping that in line with our expenses going forward. Standard, the county assumes a 2% cost of living adjustment typically for personnel at the beginning of each calendar year. We're also assuming there will be a 3% increase in health insurance, and that's pretty standard countywide for operations. So we made those assumptions when putting the budget together. So before moving forward, any questions on the high level? Nick's ready to get into the numbers for you.
Well, just, the 2% decrease in funding from Milliman.
Yeah.
And the 6% increase in enrollment, that seems like
Going the wrong way.
that could be very problematic.
Yeah.
So I know that the LRE has just been feeling kind of good about their finances for a change. And this kind of rolling out, I think, puts a big question mark on it. And I don't know how it affects, I mean, everything affects individual CMHs, but how that would, and maybe that's something you'll talk about later, but that's, it's kind of concerning.
It was the 2.9% reduction for Ottawa County's mental health, or was it for the LRE?
For the Lakeshore Regional entity.
Okay.
Which
It's-
ultimately,
Yep, I know. Yeah, but
They're actually projecting closer right now. The report that we got from Milliman, and those are initial, they're not final yet. It's closer to a 5% decrease, which for our region would be about $20 million.
so we finally got the rates up where they need. Now we're going back again.
Yeah. We have a lot of questions, and Stephanie's on the call. Mary Dumas has written a letter asking for some explanation from Milliman.
Job in the past, you know, we can
Yeah.
take great confidence in
The
there.
6% increase in enrollment is rather baffling as well. So
You don't think that's true, or you think it could be low?
I don't think that, given, well, those assumptions, and that's what they are.
Yeah. I
So
know.
if the mental health, I'm sorry, the public health emergency goes away and those enrollments stop being automatic, we anticipate a significant decrease in Medicaid enrollments. So to say that they're actually looking at a 6% increase in enrollments, we have lots of questions about. But you're right, we should be concerned because that's a lot of money, especially when we're just
well, that
getting our
would have
feet
to be the
underneath
20
us.
million, that'd have to be divvied up on
Yep.
all the CMHs, right?
We're roughly 10% of the budget, Ottawa CMH.
Okay.
So that's $2 million.
$2 million.
It's a
$2
lot
million.
of money. And this is while we're being asked repeatedly to increase rates to our providers so that they can pay a wage and be competitive.
Yes.
We
No.
So we'll keep you informed.
Okay. Okay. That was my question.
Yeah, good question.
Just to bring it up.
And
Just to bring it up because it's,
yeah, I think it's worth mentioning for sure. I think to Lynn's point, some of those numbers, they don't add up. The whole unwind, especially they're saying it's a 14-month process to get people re-enrolled. So that wouldn't even happen, assuming, you know, it wouldn't even happen within this next fiscal year. So one thing I can say coming new into CMH that's different than other budgets that I've been involved with is it is a constant, you know, it is constant. Nick is like doing journal entries every day. And like you know, if you're conservative and not, you know, there aren't big projects here. This is operational. This is to get things done. This is to be where we are October 1, where we are right now, and being able to know where the resources are. I think Keith has made that job very easy to step into and see where the funds are, but that doesn't mean that the money's there. So we'll definitely be watching that. And I do think knowing those numbers will be important and monitoring that and the states, all of the changes as they move forward. But I guess having said that, with all the assumptions that we've made and all the assumptions that are unspoken here, we'll have Nick go forward with some fun summaries in general of what his process has been for putting the budget together.
All right. Hello, everyone. You can go to the next slide.
Oh, no, stay there.
Oh, so what?
She jumped on.
Oh, okay, perfect. I see it. I was looking at mine. I was thinking mine was projecting. So we're doing good. All right. The first fund we're going to go over is our mental health fund. I don't know if you can see the numbers. They're kind of small up there on the screen. We are balanced for fiscal year 2023 with revenues matching expenses. One area I would like to call out. First, Yeah, we'll look at the columns here just so I can give you guys a brief overview of what the columns are if you can't see from your spot. The first column is the prior year actual, so where we ended up for fiscal year 2021. The current year is the second column, so this is where we are for fiscal year 2022 and where we stand. And then the third column is our recommended budget for fiscal year 2023. The fourth column is an increase or decrease compared with fiscal year 2023 to 2022. So for
Looking at a 4%.
Yep.
Okay.
4% increase.
Little fund balance.
Yep. So the main thing that I want to call out is our Medicaid Healthy Michigan funding. So this has to do with the unwind that Amy was speaking about before. Our Medicaid Healthy Michigan has increased due to the current enrollment with nobody dropping off. For fiscal year 2022, we have a current revenue of $5.5 million compared to our budget of 3.8, and that is only funding through June 2022. So we're estimating about $7 million total for Healthy Michigan for fiscal year 2022. With that being built in for next year, we're estimating that $2 million reduction will come from that line. So we are only budgeting the 5.2 for 2023. So realistically, where we're at for 2022, we're thinking we're going to end in the $7 million range. So we're only budgeting for 23 in the $5 million range with that $2 million reduction. Another category with a large increase for 23 is the fee for service. And this is directly related to the current increase in COFR, or the County of Financial Responsibility. So our institution payments and whatnot for 23 are looking to be a lot larger. For expenses, we're directing all of the additional funding directly to client care to better match the actuals and projections for fiscal year 2023. So that is the increase of the 1.3 million in that category. Anybody have any questions on the mental health fund?
And the that Health in Michigan, you said something about projecting around 5 million something or other, anticipating 2 million reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you just show the 7 million instead of the 5 million when there's the reduction and you adjust the budget? It shows that in this budget that you would have told me what 2 million anyway.
So what I did for this category, so the 5 million is where we expect to end up for 2023. The 7 million is where we expect to end for this fiscal year. So I took out the 2 million from where we were expecting this year.
Oh, I see, because that was going to be the anticipated reduction.
Yep.
For next
Yep.
year.
For next year.
Now,
So,
now.
Yep. So the 7 million is where we expect to end for fiscal year 2022. And then I reduced the 2 million out of that for fiscal year 2023 for the unwind.
The 7 million represents the number of enrollments for 2022.
Correct.
At the end of the year.
Yep.
So then we're anticipating a reduction of enrollments.
For Healthy Michigan.
Yep. For Healthy
following
Michigan.
year.
Yep.
Mhm.
With the unwind for the public health emergency.
Okay.
Okay. You can do the next slide. All right, we are estimating a 1% decrease in our millage and grant budget for fiscal year 2023. This is largely due to grant budget reductions for fiscal year 2023, specifically around our COVID grants. The mental health COVID grant has a reduction of 130,000, and the CCBHC grant has a reduction of 100,000. For revenue purposes, we do have an increase of 4% in our tax revenue. So about balances out with the 40 difference. The main thing you'll notice in the expense category is the $1 million reduction in client care and contractual. This is a result of the CCBHC grant reduction, as well as the mental health juvenile justice grant that we had a reduction in as well. We will be continuing our stabilization funding for our residential providers. Lynn and myself have come up with a $1.5 million budget for stabilization for that. And that is the direct result of the $542,000 fund balance that will be used in 2023, which is listed at the bottom of this screen.
What does that provide the providers with as far as a a raise percentage wise?
So in years past, it's really been used to pay for overtime and shift differentials. Most residential providers have significant costs as far as overtime, and some of them are doing incentives and bonuses. So that money, that's what they're using those dollars for.
Probably because of staff.
Oh yeah, they're having an incredibly difficult time attracting staff, even though
people are getting overtime and
right.
differential, whatever sort of means to keep and retain those folks working.
I think they said on average they're at about 30% overtime, so that's time and a half.
I see.
Any other questions on millage and grants budget? The next slide. All right, finally, we have our SUD budget. For this one, we are balanced revenues matching expenses. We are looking at a 2% reduction overall. This is directly related to grants that are ending. We have the SOR2 grant, which is ending September 30, 2022. So we have a large reduction in that. The harm reduction grant is ending 9/30/2022. And the post-overdose grant is ending 12/30/2022. So the reduction in expenses and revenues is all related to grants that are ending.
Is the SAMHSA grant still operating?
Yep, we have
Full?
Yeah, we have two. So the system of care for kids and families is still, we've got a couple more years on that, and CCBHC as well. Those are both SAMHSA grants.
Yep. And that's part of the one I just covered prior is the 2221 is where SAMHSA is. Any questions on SUD budgeting? Thank you.
So just to recap, revenues by source, we wanted to point out where the money comes from. So this graph you'll see that most of that are, the funds come directly from the LRE through the state for Medicaid capitated funding. Other sources for revenue, there's the general fund from the state, as well as other grants, fees, and a lot of those, going back to the same point, it is a balancing act. So as we go through the year and new grants come in, you kind of budget and kind of manage that throughout. But a big source is obviously the Medicaid capitated fund through the LRE. So some of the concerns and questions that you raised earlier are valid to know how important that is to our operation. Next slide.
Amy, is the millage on that?
That's the property taxes.
That's the property taxes.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
that's where. Okay.
Yes.
And, I got this correct. 8%. You gave us assumptions the
Correct.
first time, right?
Yes.
So every month, I'm just talking on the top of my head a little bit, the state not renegotiates, but tweaks those numbers, right? Yes. So every month, you guys go back in and then tweak it to what the state said. And then the next month you do it the same thing.
Yes.
So how many months are we out before it's finalized?
Well, end of September.
End of September. Okay, so we got August and September yet for them to negotiate. Okay, another question I got asked, how much money comes out of the general fund of the county?
It's right there.
1%,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's 1%, less than 1%.
And that is total of
476,500.
Say that again, Karen.
No.
476. Okay, I thought it was. Okay,
She's a brainer.
Thank you. Okay.
That's what she's here.
That's the same amount of money the county has given CMH for the last 14 years, I think. So
That same figure?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it hasn't changed.
It's a formula that they use, and that's the portion that the county has to
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
provide.
But the general public doesn't know that. They think it it all comes from the county.
Right.
No, even we get state general fund, but it's not county general fund.
Right.
So we should update this graph and like show how tiny the sliver is for the county's fund contribution.
Wonderful.
Yeah. All right. So then the other thing, so for me, this was a big, when I saw this slide and thought about this whole process and learning about the budget and going through kind of the steps for that, looking at this graph, how the money is spent, it was significant to me to see that 70% is direct client care related, and everything else is just small. Salaries and wages, 15 and 8%, but we really, rely or put the resources where they should be. And I think this, to me, that was a very important realization within this organization. So I don't know, I guess that's all we had. Next slide. Any questions or comments or any other information you may need?
I just have a question on the unwind with thinking about that emergency where people were no longer removed from eligibility. How does that relate to them still being served?
So the schedule, and maybe Lynn can provide a little more detail, but my understanding is there will be letters that go out notifying people, and they will have a 12-month timeline to re-enroll. And so those services will continue for a certain amount. Is it 12 months or 14 months? I thought it was, it's longer than a year, but I don't know if it includes when they get the letter sent out or from the date of the letter.
So our biggest, so the people we serve typically are going to be just fine. Okay. They're pretty squarely eligible for Medicaid, and we're not as worried about them. We get funding for every person in Ottawa County who's eligible for Medicaid, whether or not they get services from us. And so we also get a rate. We get money for all of those people, even though we don't serve them. That's the capitation part of what our funding is. And so the real worry is folks, especially for Healthy Michigan, those people tend to be people who can work in the community and get benefits through their employer. And those people have remained enrolled because there has been no disenrollment, and those people will likely drop off the enrollment, which means the dollars we got for them previously will no longer get.
Okay. So there's no concern about not serving people who need to be served because of the lack of eligibility through Medicaid that is dropping off with the unwind.
Yeah, we are concerned only because we don't want the folks we're serving who have Medicaid to lose that, and we're planning on once we know when that enrollment will end, we're planning on making sure that our staff are communicating to our consumers and telling them they need to send in their information for re-enrollment. If someone drops off of Medicaid and has no other insurance, they can certainly come to us and we will see what we can do for them through general fund. And hopefully they can get re-enrolled if they really need it and they still qualify.
So the other part to my question relates to the financial part of it. And that would be, it's not a black and white, like we're this many people leaving eligibility because of the unwind and a certain number not being served anymore because of what you just described, Lynn, with receiving the money, whether they're receiving the services or not. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
How long would it take for someone, if you're deemed not eligible, to get back on and reapply? Is that quite a process?
It actually doesn't take long long as you submit all of your information.
Okay. Well, thank you. Nicely done. Appreciate it. Next is our dashboard and attachment A, and Rich, you're gonna run this one.
So attachment A, so it's that sheet with the red and green. We're looking at January to March quarter. And once again, we have a couple of items for plan of correction that we have to do for the LRE here. I'm going to start off with indicator 1. So pre-admission screening for disposition 3 hours or less for children. We were in the 97.9%. So we passed the benchmark. We're good there. Anytime you see a target of 95 on the left side of the green numbers there, that's what we're trying to shoot for, to be over that. For adults, we were 98.9, no problem there. As a reminder, again, indicator 2A, biopsychosocial within 14 days for the different populations that we serve. There is no state benchmark yet assigned to this. The state hasn't come out with a number that we're supposed to meet. So we're still collecting the data and the information. So all we can determine at this point is whether we did better than the previous quarter or not. For MI child, we went up to 71% from 49. For MI adult, we went to 62. We sort of remained in the 80s, lower 80s for DD child. DD adult, we went up to 91.7%. And as a total, within 14 days, Ottawa went up from the previous total, 54 to 68. Indicator 3, the same thing, there is no benchmark. We did have 4 items go up from the previous quarter. We did have 1 item that went down from 100% with DD child. Some of these numbers are pretty low end, so you're looking at maybe 1 or 2 and make a big difference. All right, indicator 4A. So we have this 7 days, percent C within 7 days of inpatient discharge for the kids. We had the same number here, 85.7 in the same last quarter. But this is, it's actually 1 individual. That was an outlier. So 6 out of 7, that's where we get our 85%. We're working on a plan of correction for that one already, reaching out to a provider. And then the other item, so for adults, we're okay, 97.4. And then the other item for a plan of correction this quarter is the detox, or for SUD. Again, the 7 days follow-up after detox discharge. For this particular one, we actually had 24 discharges. 6 were exceptions. 15 received a follow-up. So 15 of 18 gives us 83%. So Anna, who has been working on the plan of correction, not this Anna, one of my staff. He's going to be reaching out to the providers and to Joel, who's our liaison for the different providers to figure out what's going on and how we can train to get our numbers up. Any questions? We're good on the indicator 10 as always, under 15% for the last indicator for the children.
Any questions for Rich? Thank you. Next is old business. We don't have any. New business. This is our service contracts. Attachment B.
Hi there.
Hi.
Good afternoon. So I only have 2 for you to consider today. The first is the Community Action House. It is an amendment to an existing contract for a peer recovery coach that is through a grant, so it will be grant funded. And then the second is for our Genoa pharmacy that we have on site. It is to create a new vendor agreement to provide enhanced medical supplies to our consumers. who may need the order for non-prescription medications and supplies. So that way they can receive those and then we would bill Medicaid.
That's a new option for clients.
Yes.
Any questions regarding these two service contracts? We'll entertain a motion for approval of these service contracts then for attachment B.
So moved. Support.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of attachment B service contract indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. Next is the June financial statements. That's attachment C.
Okay, just a little context. CMH financials continue in a strong financial position. You'll see no real issues or concerns. Entering into the fourth quarter now, you'll see the budget to actual difference. That'll kind of come closer together as we have a push to get our claims process and get providers billing for this fiscal year, for the end of this calendar year, to get that number close and have all those payables processed within a timely fashion before September 30. So we're working on communications for that now. But other than that, everything's right on target.
Do they usually, 60 days is not really out of the question as far as getting, billing and from the providers? Is that typical?
That is the maximum. So we want to get things processed right away. If people, we do have a whole committee that reviews the timeline of submissions to kind of make sure that we have as tight a timeline as possible. From a payables perspective, things that come in are processed within our office, either as returned with questions to the provider or paid to AP within 10 business days. So I think the timeline, that 60-day window, which is kind of that's a high number. We do try to keep that tighter, but there are times where it's back and forth and involving the clinician and making sure that they're, what claims were made, or whichever services were coded. There's sometimes coding issues or kind of questions about some of the, what was the intention of this claim, or that kind of thing may delay it. But I don't know, Rich, you have more.
So there could be issues as well with billing. So sometimes it's getting in the right codes, maybe claims that got entered in the system was not the correct code, so you have to go back. So those are just some of the sources of the issues that need to be resolved. Sometimes it's just really billing staff that actually we've had turnover in the provider network in terms of their billing staff. New billing staff come in, they have to relearn the system, so that causes delay in them being able to bill.
Yeah, one thing I will say, we had an open position for a provider compliance and claims supervisor, a second position, and to support that. And the big function of that position is to work with providers, make sure they understand the system, how to submit claims, that when they have issues, they're working them through our billing and claims clerks, through if it's a credentialing consideration, a lot of those different factors that may cause an issue for that submission to be flagged for review or question. So I think that'll even improve that, keep that moving forward. So we're excited to have that new person join us.
Well, thank you. We'll entertain a motion for approval of the June financial statement.
So moved.
Support.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the attachment C financial statement for June indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Attachment D, I think, is our bucket report, and that usually is for information purposes only. Anything there we should be interested in?
Why?
Kind of got washed out on the sheet here, but.
I wanted to look at it again after the conversation about the LRE and see, but I don't have a copy myself and it's a little washed out. Yeah.
They do,
No.
you know, there is a substantial fund balance there, but those dollars are allocated per CMH based on a per member per month methodology and historic spending model. So even though there is that money there, we've been allocated our Medicaid allotment. So it's not our money to spend.
The ISF.
Mhm.
Any questions on the bucket report? Okay. We'll move on. We had the presentation by Brianna, so the next motion attachment E is for approval of the recipient rights semi-annual report as it was presented. Anybody? Motion made by Holbler. There's a support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor for approval of the semi-annual report, attachment E, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Next is community mental health contract amendment number 2 to authorize the executive director to sign the calendar year 2022 MDHHS CMHSP contract amendment 2. Anything you need to highlight on that?
Nope, very minor changes. The Board Association is recommending that we sign when this comes out. So you're authorizing me to sign it. It should be coming out any day. The only change were to clarify the compliance examination, an attachment on the contract, but it was not anything that was substantive. So.
Okay. Anybody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Support.
Support. There's no further discussion. All those in favor of approval of the contract amendment 2 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. Next is the executive director's report.
I will get to the suggested motion in just a second. So I'll talk to you first about things from the department, from the state. No real changes in what the biggest issues are. Staffing continues to be by far and away the biggest concern at the department. I let you know at the last meeting that we had a meeting scheduled the following week. So on 6/30, we were invited, all of the CMHs and PHPs were invited to a meeting with the department. And they let us know that due to staffing problems, they were planning on closing 100 state beds. 50 of those state beds were being closed at Kalamazoo Psychiatric Hospital. That's the state hospital that we use the most. The other thing they brought up at the meeting was that they were implementing a policy change for those individuals who are deemed ready for discharge and do not elect to stay voluntarily. And if all resources have been exhausted through working with the CMH, that they're planning on discharging them. They can't keep them, they cannot keep folks at the state hospital who are no longer meeting criteria and don't want to be there. So
How many did that affect us as far as placements that we have from our county at the state hospital?
So I didn't check today, but I think the last count we had 7 people at the state
Are any of
hospital.
those like really long-term folks?
A couple of months, we have not, well, I'll take that back. I think actually someone's been there for over a year.
Okay.
We did have someone who was there for many, many years, but we successfully transitioned him to a placement. So we'll do the best we can. It's definitely an issue. There weren't enough beds to begin with, and now there are 100 less.
What's the capacity?
Total capacity of state hospital beds? I will have to check with you. I believe it's somewhere near 500 or 600. Does anybody know? I can check for sure for you. Yeah, it's not a lot.
Then where are the state beds? The Kalamazoo?
Walter Reuther, Caro, Kalamazoo, Hawthorne is for children, and there's the forensic center.
So the state is saying, so if a patient is there against their will, that family members put them there, or? No.
They likely were involuntarily admitted.
Okay, and now they're gonna be free to roam.
If they're ready to go and no other placements can be found, they will discharge them, is what they're telling us.
Are state doctors determining that those individuals are eligible to be released?
Yes.
So you have state doctors that are signing off on that, saying, okay, this person doesn't need to be here anymore.
Right.
They don't want to be here anymore, which is consistent with Olmsted.
Right.
They have to go.
Right.
So state doctors can, in their infinite wisdom, make a determination
Yeah,
that meets the needs of the state in order to get the beds opened up.
Do you see a problem with this?
I see a potential
As a
problem.
mental health worker, I mean.
Well, it goes back to, you know, the ongoing issue of not enough staff, not enough beds,
Okay.
because there's not enough staff. And yes, it's a symptom of what we've all been experiencing in the last year or two with the onset of COVID and less workers, whatever the issue is with staffing. You know, despite wage increases, you know, every time we increase a home care worker's wage, direct care worker, you know, McDonald's raises theirs.
So in some ways, this is a little bit like the jails years ago when they were over capacity. They said, okay, we'll release a whole bunch of these people out in there. That's kind of what they're doing because they can't find the help or pay the people. So
these folks, keep in mind, they have been determined to be ready to be discharged. So
Okay.
they no longer need that level of care. And like Bob said, they cannot be held against their will. They're not, if they don't want to stay there. And really the change is that they've been really holding on to people because they had no acceptable alternative.
some could end back up on the street.
Well, you know, there's planning going on with the CMHs. We're going to try to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, because that doesn't mean they no longer meet criteria for eligibility
No,
through community mental health, just no longer meet.
Yeah, I mean, you're assuming that they were put there, some understanding these are individuals that were put in state institutions involuntarily.
Yes.
So they were somebody considered them a danger to themselves or others, or some other standard. So you hope that the state medical doctors are making clinically sound decisions in determining that this person no longer needs to be here.
I would think we will see an increase in our contracted, you know, finding new contracts out of county probably. Because a lot of, if somebody's been there a really long time, that could be very challenging to find any place, even if they had some room that could manage that individual, you know, properly. And
it has been incredibly difficult to find any bed out of county in county.
Right.
And then add in that into that some of these folks might have a history of violence or
Right.
criminal behavior. And when a group home is barely, making it as far as staffing, bringing someone in with some real high needs.
Right, where they have to have enhanced staffing and.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
could be real.
it's a bad situation.
I think it ended up with people falling through the cracks again, and then they end up recycling.
Some more updates. I don't really have much of an update about the Senate or House bills. The legislature kind of wrapped up the fiscal year 23 budget and they're adjourned until September. So I don't have much news on that. More than likely we'll hear about those bills towards September and in the fall with lame duck. So we'll see.
Is there any conventional wisdom floating around that, like, what do we think is going to happen?
No, really, it's what we're hearing is that Senator Shirkey does not have the votes to pass his bills. Okay. We've also heard that Senator Shirkey and Mary Whiteford have been talking and maybe making some compromise between their two different bills. But other than that, I have I don't have any other information. When I get that, I will send that out to you guys. Alan Bolter from the Board Association does a good job. I have a directors forum meeting tomorrow and Wednesday, so I might hear more.
Senate bill, was it Senate Bill 714 that passed the Senate? And in that bill should be tie-barred an apple, some funding for mental health. So that if his SB 597, 598 pass, then that passes. Okay. There's other things in the bill that still will stay intact, but there's that one provision, put that carrot there to try to persuade people to come to his thinking. So hopefully people
don't get persuaded.
Don't sucker for that. So.
I wanted to let you know that on July 23rd, Saturday, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline officially became 988. So we'll only have to dial that 3-digit number to get some real-time help in suicidal and crisis situations. From the Lakeshore Regional Entity, the Beacon contract officially ended on July 1st. Not a whole lot of news on the historic deficit. They've been in contact with MDHHS talking about the risk plan that included language, the risk plan that the LRE authored that included language about using ISF to pay for past liabilities. The department has made it clear that they don't think that they can do that according to the contract, but they're doing their due diligence with.
I'm just trying to listen, so if you want to try to figure
out what they can do or can't do. So there's been quite a bit of dialogue about the LRE bylaws and operating agreement. If you recall, you actually approved the changes, but Network 180 did not. They had multiple questions that led to a review of what version of the bylaws we were actually supposed to be operating under. And it turns out that we actually are operating under the 2016 bylaws, which still had in place an executive committee, which has in subsequent years everyone was under the assumption that the voting powers went away from the executive committee into the full board, but we have to go back and rectify that. So the suggested motion that's in front of you to appoint Matt to serve as our representative on the executive committee is just short-term so that they can vote to move that out of the executive committee's powers and into the full board.
Everybody understand that?
Then the discussion can continue on the bylaws and the operating agreement. Once the voting authority moves to the full board.
And that's the purpose of the motion.
Would you like that motion to be made?
I'll make that a motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Oh, he said this mental health convoluted system, but.
LRE.
It's complicated.
It's been like this forever.
Yes.
All right, all those in favor of appointing Matthew Fenske to serve on the Ottawa County Representative Lakeshore Regional Entity Board, Executive Board Committee, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries.
May the force be with you.
How long is this term?
Yeah.
It's really just until they are able to vote changes in.
Could be one or two LRA meetings.
Okay, okay.
So
One would assume that they're going to revise the bylaw. Say, take this out of the executive committee, get it to the full committee, they'll revise the bylaws.
Yes.
there is one glitch, however. I don't believe Network 180 is going to participate in approving the bylaws or the operating agreement.
So we're kind of talking about two different things. This is only to.
It's better every day.
Get the process correct.
The process, correct, yes.
Whether or not the CMHs will approve the changes in the operating agreement and the bylaws is still open to discussion. And Matt's right, Network 180 has some concerns that I'm not sure are going to be.
Concerns that they're giving up too much control.
I think that's pretty darn close.
Good guess, huh?
So we already talked about 2023's Medicaid rate projections. I'll keep you informed on that. Like I said, we have written a letter to the rep from the actuarial service to get some clarification on how they came up with their numbers. But obviously, that could be an issue for all of the CMHs within our region. Our region got the biggest hit. I don't know why at this point. From CMH, I just wanted to remind everyone, we had our meeting several months ago where I talked to you guys about the strategic priorities that we came up with. I'll just briefly go over what those are. They're still relevant for mid-year. So one of our strategic priorities is to preserve core services in the public system. We've already talked about how some of these proposals that are out there in the legislation could definitely impact what we do and how public the system remains. Another strategic priority is integrated health and care coordination. Our CCBHC grant, that Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic, certainly has gotten us closer to realizing integrated healthcare and care coordination, as well as focusing on wellness opportunities for the people we serve. Efficiency and accountability. So on an ongoing basis, we have multiple ways that we are reviewed as far as following the rules, following our contract, quality improvement. We have several big audits coming up. We just went through one. If you'll recall, the Lakeshore Regional Entity did a very thorough review of our services and processes. We have another audit coming up with the department to review our waivers. That starts in October and will run through November. And then, believe it or not, in 2023, May, we will be reviewed again by CARF, and CARF is our accreditation body. So we have those outside entities looking in to see how we're doing. We also do tons of work internally. I've asked Rich to put a report together just so you can see what types of checks and balances we do on a regular basis to make sure that we're, again, providing good service and following all the regulations that we have to according to our contracts. The last strategic priority is managing costs and advocating for adequate funding. Amy just went over what we anticipate doing for 2023. And in 2022, I think we'll be very close as far as our revenue to expenses and what we budgeted for in 2022. And we will continuously, if we get a 5% cut, it won't be without us trying to advocate and figure out what's going on. So that's all I have for you, unless you have questions.
If we didn't have our millage, would this be squeezing us even tighter?
Oh yeah, we'd be $3.4 million less in funding. And it's up for renewal in 2026.
Okay.
And Anna's going to take care of all that.
Okay, next is general information, comments, and meetings attended. Mr. Holborn?
When is the meeting in August?
Okay.
There's no date. Is
Yeah,
it
I
the
know.
first?
I just saw that. I'll tell you when it is right now. I think
It's
it's
a surprise.
22nd. I believe it's the 22nd.
22nd of August
And it looks like we will be all
on James Street.
things are indicating that we'll be back in our offices by then.
Okay.
So plan on Ottawa. I'll let you know if it's not.
We'll plan on James Street?
Yep.
Okay.
Then it's gonna have to move out.
And then we'll give you a tour of the new office building.
Cool.
Yes, I'll have to move out of the boardroom.
Yeah, we'll move back to work because it's so much fun. All the wires and stuff, it's great.
Any meetings or anything anybody like to add? Okay, this will be our second opportunity for public comment. Is there someone on the line that would like to make public comment?
Rosalie Austin.
Rosalie?
Hi,
Whoa.
can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you good, Rosalie.
Hi, last month you discussed the $17 million surplus. Is that still valid?
For Ottawa CMH,
Yes.
we don't have a $17 million surplus.
Is that what's the ISF fund then?
So if we talked about an ISF balance, it was through the regional entity, the Lakeshore regional entity.
I thought the Lakeshore regional entity is on track for a $61 million surplus.
I'm not sure where 17 million came from, Rosalie. We can go back and review our notes.
And then also the Holland Aquatic Center, why does that require a contract from the Health Endowment Fund? It's been 4 months now.
I know we're working on it.
And then whatever happened to the Consumer Advisory Committee? And how does one join the LRE Consumer Advisory Committee? And what about the South D Parent Advisory Committee with CMH, LRE, and the state? Because there's non-compliance with the South D technical requirements.
I can respond back to you, Rosalie. I'll send you an email.
And then also, now that there's the new 988 crisis line that goes local to like the access center, or how is that going to work? Is that contracted out like it is now?
It will work together. The 988 number will work. If they need to get a hold of our access center or our crisis team, they'll do that.
Are those one and the same, or how do you get real-time help? Because that's what you said, it's supposed to be real-time help and it's not. And there's some discrepancy between if you're released from inpatient psych with a referral to partial hospitalization, according to the Medicaid provider manual, that referral from the psych to the partial hospitalization, all you need is an authorization, not another crisis assessment that holds up the authorization. To me, that's another compliance issue. The referral alone should be enough for an authorization, not requiring a mobile crisis unit to go to Pine Rest to do another assessment, which seems to be a duplication of services when time is of the essence to get treatment. And a person who's just released from inpatient psych is taken out of a group treatment and set alone in a room waiting for authorization and then told they can leave.
We'll get some answers for you, Rosalie.
Because that's disturbing.
Lynn's writing it down and we'll get some answers to you. Thanks. Thanks for reaching out once again. Thank you. Is there any other person on public comment?
No.
No? Okay. We'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Support.
All those in favor of adjourning indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, we're adjourned.
Lynn, you come over here by me a minute.
Sure.
You talk.